You're welcome back to Dateline Abuja. I still have here with me in the studios the Deputy Executive Director of UN Habitat, Dr. Aisa Kaichira. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
7 priority areas have been set from this African regional meeting. These 7 areas also have sub-priorities. Now, we know that many African countries have different levels of development. How will African nations implement these priorities?
In developing the 7 strategic priorities, the African leaders have taken into context and consideration the various levels of development and even levels of urbanization in the countries. And as I mentioned, there was a participatory critical analysis at national level that came out with the national reports upon which this is hinged. But across the board, there are principles of institutional and policy guidelines and standards that can support us to achieve what we want. And that has been the main focus of the discussion. In the sense that, yes, we may have different levels of development, but governance and including communities in the planning process is certainly something that we all share as a principle. How you do it, you need to contextualize that. We need to recognize that we have to plan for urbanization. And in planning, we need to look at the 3 aspects. The aspect of governance, land, and legislation. We are seeing from our research as UN Habitat, over 70% of land on this continent is unregistered, unrecognized. And that is something like a foundation that we need to deal with. Secondly, on urban planning and design, we agree that we're not looking for mega cities versus villages. We need a continuum of urbanization. Planning for our capital cities like Abuja, Lagos, as we plan for the intermediate towns and cities, as we plan for the village centers, and creating an interconnected territorial planning process that helps the urban to benefit from the rural, add value to it, and the other way around. I think that's something that we all agree upon. How you do it has to be put into context. And finally, we've also observed that we have sometimes good plans, but they're only implementable if they have a financing model behind them, which is sustainable. And that is hinged around both resource mobilization or municipal financing and a good taxation system. So these are the key things beyond which now we emphasize the infrastructure, basic services. We need to have access to basic services, infrastructure, water, sanitation, energy, in a manner that is inclusive, as well as adequate shelter. We are in an era of, I hate to say this, but it's the truth, that because of the increasing inequalities between the people living in towns and cities, the levels of social conflict, sometimes leading to safety, crime, and the other extreme end of extremism, we can't run away from the fact that we need safe cities. Again, this is something that you will contextualize in your situation, but it's a common principle. And I think what we're seeing here is Africans are moving across borders. They're not consulting us as leaders of the UN or the politicians. They're looking for opportunities. They're looking for jobs. How do we enable that trade, that investment, and how do we use urbanization to be able to create the diversity and tap into the beautiful and rich Africa that we have?
You had mentioned something on security. Now, that brings me to my next question. Forced urbanization. Is Africa prepared to tackle urbanization occasioned by terrorism?
Do we have a choice, Omelak? I think it's our responsibility as leaders that even when challenged, especially under time of crisis, the leadership and communities stand up to protect their own. It's a test of leadership. So are we ready? I believe we are. I think we have lessons to learn. It's a huge challenge. But it has to start from the connection between the leadership and the people. so that that community engagement, mobilization, helps people to go, maybe before I go, extremism is one like end of the spectrum, but overall safety and crime prevention in cities and towns has traditionally been the role being really under police. But that doesn't work. It's not sufficient. We need to help create ways beyond which we go beyond policing and help people to take ownership of their role in enabling police to do its role, but more importantly, for communities to also have a stake in availing and upholding their safety and security. We have a program in UN Habitat that we call the Safer Cities Program. And we've invested in this program for over 20 years across the globe. And we have worked at city level with mayors to first of all define what is safety, where are the safe areas, where are the unsafe areas, what are the sources of crime, what are the vulnerable points. And so while you work on the infrastructure, for instance, lighting, cameras, you also, much more importantly, work on the software. And that software is about community participation and awareness, so that people can be able to, first of all, know what's happening in their neighborhoods, take the responsibility and trust leadership also to share with them this information and have a stake in protecting themselves.
That's so much we can take on this program. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much, Omelag.
Thank you for your mails, as always. Do keep your views and comments coming using the address and Twitter handle on your screen. You can also let us know anything happening within your area, especially if you are in the nation's capital. Don't forget, you can view the program on youtube.com/channelsweb/videos. You may make your comments after viewing the videos. Always remember to include your name and where you're writing us from. I am Omelogo Nnadi. See you next week.